Hi everyone, Jacob here. Now, if you're a university student with either a business or a commerce background, you might be considering doing the Chartered Accountants program or the Chartered Financial Analyst program after you've graduated and you've started working full-time. Or you might be in a situation where you're already working full-time, but you just haven't decided which program you want to do, and you know you want to do either one of those for career progression reasons. I've been working for just over 3 years now, and I wanted to share some of my motivations for why I did both programs simultaneously and where that's led me in my career progression since. I'm hoping from this video it would provide some additional clarity on these programs, and if there's interest, I might make some videos on some of the study methods and tips that I found helpful in my experience. If you don't know how these programs are structured, stay tuned, otherwise feel free to skip to this time here to begin hearing my story. So the CA program consists of 5 units: taxation, audit and assurance, management, accounting and applied finance, financial accounting and reporting, and capstone, which is more like a presentation and case study unit, which kind of draws on all the other previous units before that. Each exam is about 3.5 hours, including reading time, to answer 4 questions with multiple parts under each question. There's typically about an 80% pass rate for these units, but there's about 70% for taxation and financial accounting and reporting, which tend to be the harder units. As for the CFA program, there are just 3 levels, but you can only sit the exam once a year in June. Otherwise, for level 1, they also offer a December option. And if you fail, you have to sit this exam again the following year. It's by far the hardest finance qualification, covering 10 topics over a 6-hour exam with a 1-hour break in between each 3-hour half. People often underestimate just how much work goes into preparing for one of these exams. And even as a finance major, there is still a lot of material to cover. I often get questions from friends asking, surely there's not that much material. I'm a finance major. Yeah, surely. Oh my god, yes. Sure. So I did a 3-year bachelor degree in commerce, majoring in accounting and finance, and I was fortunate enough to land an internship with the Big 4 accounting firm in their external audit division. I decided to apply for the audit stream given that a lot of the people that I spoke to, from university clubs to representatives to networking nights, all agreed that audit was a great place to start your career as it gave you great accounting skills and general business acumen. So after my internship, I was offered a graduate role and I started the following year after my 21st birthday. I look back at my time in university and I think my one regret was not going on exchange. I should have done either a double degree or I should have split up my 3-year into a 4-year degree, so I would have a little bit more time to enjoy that university life and maybe live abroad for a period of time. So because of that one regret from university, my goal was to work 3.5 years, get that senior title at my firm, and then get my CA qualification and then jet set off to either the US or the UK for a period of time on a secondment, and then come back to Australia after 2 years and figure out what I wanted to do afterwards. That was my 3 to 5 year plan, but as you know, life isn't quite as linear as you plan it to be, and I made a decision afterwards which changed my life. So it was maybe about 2 weeks after I started full-time work. We were in audit training. This is great, and I was learning heaps during that time. I was thinking whether or not I'd wanted to do this for 3 to 5 years. And I started thinking a lot, and eventually I came to the point where I was like, I think I need to seek more advice and decide whether this is what I really wanted to do for a career. That weekend I caught up with my brother, who's almost about 10 years older than I am, and we had a long talk. I didn't 100% know what I wanted to do, but at the same time I had a better sense of where I wanted to steer my career and what were the different pivot points from audit, whether I wanted to move into financial accounting, whether I wanted to move to consulting, corporate finance, or just finance in general. So after that discussion, I decided that I was either trying to move into transaction services due diligence, which essentially you'd be doing financial due diligence when people buy or sell mid-sized companies, or mergers and acquisitions advisory, being the sell-side advisor for selling these businesses, similar to what an investment banker would do. If I moved into another team at a Big 4 firm, that would be around the mid-sized companies. Or I was looking at equities research, writing research reports on various companies based on the expected growth and just having a target price for their shares. After that talk, I decided to impulsively enroll into level 1 of the CFA program. I had probation ending in about 3 months, so I wouldn't start my CA program until then. And being a fresh graduate, I think I tried to capitalize on the fact that I wouldn't leave later than 6:30 after a normal day of work, so I wouldn't get smashed during the weekdays and I would have time to study after work. So it just seemed like the perfect plan at the time. So that 10-week period was probably one of the most stressful points in my life, just given technically I had a 0 net worth and I owed my brother $1,500, $1,000 for the CFA enrollment and the other $500 for groceries and petrol. On top of that, I was also looking at the subreddit. Everyone said minimum of 3 months study. Some people started in September the previous year. I constantly had thoughts on whether I should have spent the $4,000 enrolling for the December exam instead, and whether I just threw $4,000 down the drain. And on top of that, I hadn't even told my colleagues that I was studying for this exam, purely because I didn't want to tell them that, hey, I'm studying for this big exam, I spent $4,000, and in the end have to tell them that I failed it in a few months' time. As for my routine, I finished between 6 to 6:30 on most days, and Friday I finished 5 on the dot. So given that I had a new graduate cohort and I wanted to get to know them as well, I'll join them for a drink and then have to jet off afterwards at 6 because I had to go to the library for another 3 hours for that Friday night. Grim, I know. Only to wake up on Saturday and Sunday to get to the library between 8 to 9 in the morning, and then I'd study there until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'd rack up easily about 30 hours on average over that 10-week period. I remember the night that I got my results. I think it would have been 9 a.m. somewhere on the East Coast in the US, but over in Australia, the results came out somewhere around 11 p.m. And that year was also the year they had a huge email bungle, and to this day, I've never received my results email. I went to bed at 10 o'clock and I had a melatonin, and even though I had that melatonin, I woke up every 2 hours for the rest of the night checking my phone, and I never got the results. Eventually, I went onto a subreddit at 7 o'clock in the morning when I woke up, and I checked my results at work, and thankfully I saw this. This was the last year that they had this format for your CFA results, and they changed it afterwards to show as a percentile and how you did against other people who sat the exam. But from what I read online for these results, I just passed barely. So around the time that I finished level 1 CFA, I also started my first CA module, which was Audit and Assurance, and in comparison, that was much easier. I read the study materials on the train every morning and night on the way home from work, and that was about a 40-minute train ride each way. And on the weekends, I would only have to put in the Saturday compared to both days previously. So over the course of the next 2.5 years, I would jump between CFA and CA studies. So I would do level 1 CFA, and then I did Audit and Assurance, and then I did a financial accounting and reporting. I did level 2 over the next 6 months study period, and then I would do taxation, and then I did management accounting and applied finance. I did level 3 CFA, and then I finished with my final capstone module at the end of last year. Compared to level 1 of the CFA program, where I basically crammed the curriculum in a 10-week span, I had much more time for level 2 and 3, which were about 6 months study period for each one. But that being said, my progression at the firm also meant that I had more responsibilities and had people to coach, and also had to do work past 6:30 essentially. As a result, even though I had about 6 months to prepare for level 2 and 3 respectively, compared to the 10 weeks I had for level 1, I had more responsibilities, and that meant that my hours went from 40 hours a week and it went closer to 50 hours a week on average. After I finished level 3 of the CFA program, that's when I started actively looking for my next role. And that's when I started a financial modeling course online. I started with a provider called Wall Street Prep, which I can highly recommend. They're really great. I reached out to people in my network as well as on LinkedIn in order to try to catch up over coffee and see what the day-to-day really entails. Going back into university, I realized that a lot of the marketing from all the various campus recruiters that came on, you get quite influenced on what you think you want to do for a living and what sounds, sexy, like, oh, I want to work for this firm, I want to work for that firm. I realized that it's very hard to tell as a fresh graduate what you want to do, because at the end of the day, you don't know what the job entails until you do it, or until you speak to someone else and you kind of get a broad accumulated knowledge of the various jobs that are available, the kind of things that they do day to day. Because I think for a long period of time in university, people are just trying to land a job, and they want it to be for a reputable firm. They want there to be career progression, but they don't know exactly what they want to do. And I was the same. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was lucky enough to have someone in my circle which I could rely on to get advice. And my biggest advice would be, if you don't have anyone in your network that's like that, reach out to people. There's people on LinkedIn, they're happy to take cold emails, and you're able to take them out for a coffee chat, pick their brain. And I think that's been really important, because I did very similar after I started with people in other divisions that sounded interesting, but I wanted to know a little bit more about what their day-to-day life was. I digress. And I picked their brains. I asked them questions about what they do day to day. I asked them intelligent questions about the general field that they were in. And a lot of them were quite receptive to my proactivity to reaching out to them. So definitely don't be afraid of reaching out if you think that, oh, I'm just going to get rejected or whatnot. All of it is a natural process, and while it does seem quite alien, and I definitely can relate to that from times when I thought about it when I was a university student, and I thought, oh, just reaching out to a complete stranger and asking them for coffee, and then it sounds like quite an alien concept, but in reality, after you started working full time, it's actually quite natural. And while none of these ended up being a lead to my next role, I found that it was still very, very helpful to kind of shape how you kind of perceive what someone does day to day in their service line. And it's very hard to tell based on a website's information section, so definitely does add a little bit more light and color to what they do day to day. And after a few months of searching for a new role, I finally landed one with a fund manager as an external equities analyst. So while that was my story on how I moved from Big Four audit to the funds management industry, the question is, which is the better qualification for you? And there's no right answer, given that everyone would have different career goals. But essentially, I believe that for the CA program, it is quite versatile because you would be able to travel internationally with it, and it's quite applicable to a wide range of fields. For example, you could become a financial controller or a CFO. You could work at a bank as a credit analyst. You could work as a management accountant. You could work in-house at a large corporation in their corporate finance team. If you're considering pursuing a career in investments, more specifically equities, fixed income, portfolio management, etc., you might want to consider doing the CFA, given that it is the gold standard within finance qualifications to have the CFA charter holder. While the CFA is predominantly aimed at people who work in the investment related field, some people from an accounting background would use it as a pivot point on their resume to try to break into the finance field, which I was at one point when I was applying for a bunch of different roles that interested me. So when I was searching for a new role, I was fortunate enough to interview at another Big Four accounting firm within their mergers and acquisition advisory team, as well as a debt capital markets team at a boutique corporate advisory firm. Now, while I didn't land any of those roles, I thought it was important to note that I think the main reason why I got into those interview rooms was that on paper it said that I finished level 3 of the CFA program. How you perform in an interview would determine an outcome of whether or not you got it, but the CFA isn't a golden ticket to getting any role in finance that you might think it is. There are thousands and thousands of candidates who sit this exam globally, and to pass the exams is one thing, but for you to have relevant experience and be able to draw on that as to why you're a suited candidate for the next role is another question. I really like to stress the amount of time it takes to study for each level of the CFA program. I think a lot of people underestimate how much content there is to actually go through, so make sure you have enough time to prepare for that. And while people might weigh up the CA, CFA, even doing an MBA, which would be considerably more expensive, I think it's very important to recognize that you should think about why you're doing the CFA if you choose to do so. I mean, there's no point running if you don't know where the destination is, right? And similarly for this, if you don't know where the CFA is going to take your career, there's no point doing it and putting in those hours and hours if it doesn't amount to anything. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you found this video useful, please share it with your friends. Please give me a like and subscribe. I'm trying to get this YouTube thing off the ground. But on a more serious note, I'm going to be putting out some more videos in the future about general study productivity, study habits to adopt, how I tackled the CFA program. So if this is something that you might be interested in, please give me a subscribe, and I'm looking to see you in the next video. See ya.